us first see intragenic interaction. We have defined intragenic interaction as a phenomenon where the phenotype of a gene gets modified by the influence of its own allele. Its own allele. So it is an interaction between two alleles of the same gene. One example for this, one situation showing this kind of interaction is called incomplete dominance. So let us take an example to show incomplete dominance. Normally we have seen that between two alleles, one is dominant, the other is recessive. This phenomenon is called incomplete dominance because here the dominant gene fails to express itself completely. The dominant gene fails to express itself completely due to the influence of its allele. This idea was first shown in the plant commonly called 4 o'clock plant, Mirabilis jalapa. Mirabilis jalapa, commonly called 4 o'clock plant because the flower normally opens at about 4 o'clock in the evening. In this plant, flower color is of two types. There are plants producing red flowers, plants producing white flowers. Plants producing red flowers undergoing self-pollination result in the formation of only red flowered plants. Similarly, white flowered plants are undergoing self-pollination, produce only white flowered plants. In other words, red flowered condition is a pure breeding condition, or to be more specific, it is a homozygous condition. Similarly, white flowered condition is a homozygous condition. Suppose a red flowered plant is allowed to undergo cross pollination with white flowered plant. Surprisingly, in the next generation, all the resulting plants produced pink flowered plants. If red was dominant over white, it should have been red flowered plants. If white was dominant over red, it should have been white flowered plants. But interestingly, there were pink flowered plants. When these pink flowered plants are selfed in the next generation, this is F1, in the F2 generation, you get red flowered plants, pink flowered plants, and white flowered plants, in the ratio 1:2:1. So in the F1 generation, neither red completely appeared nor white completely appeared. So the expression of one gene was influenced by the other allele. So pink flowered plants were produced. The next generation, when they were allowed to undergo selfing, there were red flowered plants, pink flowered plants, and white flowered plants in the ratio 1:2:1. Now suppose we represent the red flowered plants as capital R homozygous, white flowered plants as small r, capital R will be the gamete here, small r will be the gamete here, fusion of these two results in a genotype capital R, small r. But what was the phenotype? The phenotype was pink flowered plants. Assuming that red flowered condition is dominant, we have chosen capital R and small r. But here the allele white flowered character allele influenced the dominant character. So when they are together, capital R cannot dominate over small r. Therefore, an intermediate condition, pink flowered condition, resulted. When these plants are allowed to undergo self-pollination, capital R small r into capital R small r, two types of gametes here, capital R small r, capital R small r. So 2 into 2, 4 combinations. Putting a checkerboard, capital R, small r, capital R, small r, this into this, capital R, red flowered plant, this into this, capital R, small r, pink flowered plant, capital R, small r, this into this, capital R, small r, pink flowered plant, this into this, small r, white flowered plant. So there were 3 different types of plants. Red flowered plants, pink flowered plants, and white flowered plants. The ratio was 1:2:1. Red flowered, pink flowered, and white flowered plants in the ratio 1:2:1. Now look at this situation here. This 1:2:1 ratio is not only the phenotypic ratio. This is a red flowered plant, these two are pink flowered plants, this is a white flowered plant. So phenotypic ratio, but it is also the genotypic ratio. Homozygous, heterozygous, homozygous in the ratio 1:2:1. So in the example for incomplete dominance, the phenotypic ratio and the genotypic ratio will be one and the same. What is the deviation here? The deviation here is seen in this stage. If one of the 2 alleles had been completely dominant, then red flowered condition should have appeared here. All the resulting plants should have been red flowered plants. But the red flowered condition could not express completely. Its expression was influenced by the gene responsible for white flowered condition. Thereafter, that means this is a deviation from the law of dominance, but it is not a deviation from the law of segregation. Thereafter, you can see there is segregation of the 2 genes. So this is a incomplete dominance is a deviation from the law of dominance, but it is not a deviation from the law of segregation.